So on the last episode of Final Encountercast, we talked about a proposed voice actor strike against the video game industry. We want to follow up on that conversation by talking about the vote that went down on October 7th. The initiative has been passed by a wide margin, a 96% margin of those who voted to give the union authority to strike. That's a fairly high number and a huge impact on the video game industry. And joining us today to talk about this issue, we've got one of the most notable video game voice actors ever, David Hayter, joining us today on Final Encountercast to break down the SAG-AFTRA strike. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
The honor is all ours. Let's be honest.
That's on us.
Let's be honest. Yeah, the honor is all on this side of the table.
You're very kind.
But I have to assume that you did vote. We're not going to ask you which way you cast your vote, but just going off, what you've posted on Twitter, your support for the I'm on Board 2015 and Performance Matters hashtags. What influenced you to vote the way that you did in giving the authorization for this strike?
Well, I was invited to attend negotiations between the producers, the studios, and the actors, and I was so appalled by their complete dismissal of the act, and it was a room. I mean, it was a video game player's dream. That room. It was, Steve Blum and Jennifer Hale and Phil Lamar.
Wow, yeah.
Like just the top people, like the A-list talent, and basically the developers. It's two lawyers that sit in front of each group, and then basically they're there to communicate with each other, and we all just have to sort of listen. Mm-hmm. And then discuss it in private. And, and the first thing their lawyer said was, okay, first of all, we're not even going to discuss any sort of increases in pay or any sort of compensatory raises of any sort. That's a non-starter, so it's not going to happen. So all we're going to talk about are the punishment that you'll get for showing up late or not paying attention while you're working, whatever. And, and our negotiator was very, very good, and we had spoken to him at length beforehand to sort of say, to illustrate to them that there are a certain level of voice actor talent that really have an impact on the sales of games and on the reality of games, on the immersive experience of games, and some of these games have enormous profit margins,
yes.
And so to dismiss those people so incredibly rudely really pissed me off. And, it's a weird situation for me because while I'm fairly well known as a voice actor, it's not my main job.
Right.
I'm a screenwriter.
Right.
Primarily a screenwriter, filmmaker, and I make a lot more money doing that than I do as a voice actor. I really, I'm a voice actor because I love it. But it's sort of my side job. But in my role as a filmmaker, I negotiate deals all the time. I deal with studios and I deal with business affairs departments all the time. And this rank dismissal of all this incredible talent was so annoying to me that basically I stood up and I said, look, after everybody had left the room and it was just the actors again, I said, look, when an opponent is negotiating with you like that, with just a scorched earth, zero give to their game, you don't have any option but to threaten a strike.
I was going to say that didn't sound like a negotiation at all.
It wasn't a negotiation. It was just purely insulting, and there were no points on which they were willing to. I mean, well, that's not entirely true. They were willing to discuss, accommodations for vocal stress and things like that. A bunch of inside elements to the job. But
sure.
As far as changing the contract in any serious way, they weren't even willing to discuss it, and that really upsets me. So I said, look, this is your only form of leverage. If they feel like they can make a $100 million game with non-union talent, let them. And A, see what you get performance-wise, and B, see how long it takes you, because someone like myself or Jennifer Hale, we work so much faster and so much more efficiently than people who have just entered the business.
Yeah.
So, it was hard for me because I don't want to urge people whose living depends on this to authorize a strike, but as a businessman, I was like, I don't think there's any other option.
Yeah, so, that's definitely a difficult position to be in, because you do recognize that these people's entire lives and livelihood depends on their ability to act and get work and keep work, especially because, as you had mentioned before, you're not being cut in on the residuals of extremely successful titles, which, it seems like that happens for movies. It happens in almost any industry where you have someone who is performing. And the fact, I think it actually kind of surprised a lot of gamers when they first heard about it, if they've heard about it at all, that voice actors aren't cut into to the residual profits from a game, and that you're only paid your rate for the session, right?
Well, your initial fee, which they're so tight about allowing any increase in pay, that typically, no matter how well known you are, no matter how many successful games you've done, you're still probably getting scale for the game. If you're very, very lucky, or you're a hard ass like me, you might get double scale, but that's it. And then the game goes on to make, $500 million, and the CEOs of the companies are taking bonuses of millions and millions of dollars. It's very difficult for your favorite voice actors to survive. And, when people complain and they say, well, it's such a cushy job, such a great job, I do it for free or whatever. Which, it is a great job, but it is work, and it takes a huge amount of work to get into the industry and to stay in the industry.
Absolutely.
And really what the situation is you put in 25 years worth of work and build a name for yourself, you're still making the same amount of money you were making that first year. Mm-hmm. You might be getting more jobs, but your pay rate is exactly the same. And I just don't think it's not fair. It's not good for the industry, and it doesn't allow, the fans to get as much access to people that they really love.
Right. Well, and so how did this kind of like rocky relationship start to form? Because like you've been involved with acting, voice acting in video games since really kind of like it was at the forefront of the technology. Metal Gear Solid was like the very first game that I can remember that was voice acted from front to back, and that was sort of like a technical achievement at that time that blew away everyone and made a really strong impression. So being that you've been involved with this since the very kind of like origins of it, what's kind of like, do you have any insight on the origins of the conflict, or at least the candor between voice actors and the video game industry?
Oh yeah, well, and I mean, just to clarify, I actually, when I lived in Japan in the mid '80s, started doing voices for arcade games.
Oh wow!
So, I mean, I've been doing it since video games were invented.
Wow!
When I was a kid.
Well, I'm really glad we had you on for this, because that's a really unique and important perspective to have on this.
Yeah, they needed. I lived in Japan, and the Japanese developers needed people who spoke English. Quiet. All right. Sorry, Mike.
Solid Snake's training his wolves. Big Boss is training his wolves, guys. It's okay.
Yeah, I'm a musher.
Yeah. There you go.
So basically, what was the question?
How
have I seen this develop?
Yeah.
So basically, what had occurred? So in those early arcade games, it's just, we need somebody that speaks English to say destroy the humans or whatever.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really thought of as a major part of the game. And then as games got more cinematic, they started to create what is now known as cutscenes.
Right. And it's sort of like the early voice acting was almost more like sound effects. You'd think of them more like sound effects triggered specifically at like at a keystroke or at an event in the game. So the move over to
like there was a boxing game in the 80s where the ref would say stop, box, like that, and so it was that sort of thing. So typically, the voices were usually done by game designers. And then the PlayStation 1 came along, and I remember Resident Evil came out, and I was so blown away by that game. It was just so much bigger and so much more expansive than anything I'd seen, and so much more cinematic. But the acting was. It was terrible.
Oh, it was awful. Oh man, was that first Resident Evil bad? Oh, I mean, no, it was a great game, but
I hope those actors aren't listening. But I'm sure it was all the director's fault. But it was so silly that it diminished the quality of the visuals.
Right.
And so, when Metal Gear came along, and they got me, and they got Jennifer Hale, and they got Christopher Randolph, who played Otacon, and all these people, it was put together by Chris Zimmerman, who directed all the English voice versions of all the Metal Gear games, and she knew all the best actors in town, so she pulled us all together, and we really made an effort to create a cinematic experience worthy of the visuals we were seeing, and then that was a big hit. People became very attached to us and our characters, and it became an element of the game, which was a selling point for people. Sorry, my dogs are horrible. But at the same time, the game developers were like, well, the voice is incidental, so we don't want to pay any extra. We don't want to. Incur any more costs than we have to.
Right.
Which is understandable. But as I started to realize the value of the games versus the amount of money they would make versus their budget, I was a little more savvy, and I started to say, well, I think you could cut me in for a little more. And so that's how it started.
So, this kind of like combative relationship seems like it, like the dismissal from the game company's part. It almost seems like it's built into the relationship, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, and I think there was also a cultural difference from Japan to America, where people ask me all the time what's my relationship like with Hideo Kojima, the creator of the Metal Gear games.
Sure.
I don't have one. I barely met the man. I've met him maybe 3 times in my life, but the English language version isn't something he pays much attention to. That may seem strange, but it's not. He focuses on the Japanese version of the game. So the fact that I personally was asking for more money for the Metal Gear games just doesn't connect for him.
Gotcha.
It's understandable how these things come together, and it's understandable for me as someone who has actually produced, movies and television and have had to pay people. You want to keep your costs down, but at the same time, the business evolves, and we as voice actors, I think, have deservedly built up huge audiences that will pay to hear us in a game, and particularly now that there's mocap. I mean, it's a lot more like being a movie star than it used to be.
Absolutely, and that's what that seems to be one of the big points that SAG-AFTRA is pushing for is getting stunt pay for vocally stressful sessions. Now, there's been this legend out there that I've heard for years and years about your recording of the Metal Gear Solid 4 vocal track, and that was so that old Snake's voice was so vocally stressful that you actually had a puke bucket in studio. Is that true?
No, that's
I don't know where I picked that up from.
I have a pretty good story along those lines. No, first of all, Snake's voice may sound vocally stressful. It's not, because I had a lot of theater training. I can do Snake's voice all day. It doesn't hurt me. But what does really impact me are the the action sounds.
Yeah.
So for a game like Metal Gear, we have to do like a full day of me getting shot, getting punched in the gut, getting kicked in the face, falling off a wall, getting electrocuted, throwing up, and so on and so forth. And so, and typically I write in the morning, so my sessions are always in the afternoon, right after lunch.
Mm-hmm.
So I had been to Carl Jr. One day before coming in to record, I think it was Metal Gear 3. And there's a feature in Metal Gear 3 where you spin Snake around and around and around, and then he throws up. So I have to do the throwing.
Yes. Yes.
And I pride myself on realism, so I'm like, and I'm doing these things. And at one point, I just projectile vomited all over the mic, all over the studio. I mean, my burger and fries went everywhere.
Oh, no.
I was utterly humiliated. And I mean, this is all very expensive equipment.
Yeah.
Could they use those takes?
Airtight room. Well, hopefully they did.
Yeah, hopefully that was the take that made it into the game.
The most expensive
It was
take.
certainly the most realistic. But we probably got a pop on the mic. And then I was like immediately cleaning it up, and they're like, David, you don't have to do that. And I'm like, I really, really do. So that's the actual true story, but that's the only time I've ever barfed in the booth.
So tell us. I mean, you described a bit of a vocally stressful session where you're getting shot, you're being killed. But I mean, there are some of these games where it almost seems like there are entire characterizations. Marcus Phoenix comes to mind from Gears of War, where John DiMaggio is basically just screaming the entire game. Almost every piece of dialogue is screamed throughout that game. So what does a vocally stressful session look like for you, and what are the very real medical implications that comes along with something like that?
Well, when I audition with a voice, I try to do something I can sustain over a long period of time. So, like I say, the Snake voice I can do. I've got techniques that allow me to do it long term, and and I can lose my voice if it's particularly stressful, but that's about it. But some people develop vocal nodes. Some people, blow out their voice to a point, like if you're doing something like what John DiMaggio was doing, you can blow out your voice to the point where you can't work for a week. And then, any other jobs you had have to fall by the wayside.
Right.
And, people can really, it's the same affliction that hits singers. You hear people, they develop vocal nodes, they destroy their vocal cords, that sort of thing. And then they're also fighting for, stunt support in terms of motion capture.
Right.
Because, now voice actors have to do stunts. They have to roll around. They have to fight. They have to do these things. And in a movie, you would have a whole team there to make sure that you were safe. And in voiceover, that's not necessarily the case.
Wow. How often do you get booked on, or how, not you personally, but how often nowadays does somebody get booked onto a project for a voice and also have to do mocap? Like, how often is that a part of the job?
Well, I have no idea. I mean, I only know my own experience, and I haven't done a lot of it, though I enjoy doing the motion capture. But if you look at, typically, like the latest Metal Gear game, I think they all had to do the motion capture. I think they actually did it with the English actors for the first time after they got rid of me.
That's too bad. That's too bad.
Whatever. This was a good one. So, when you're watching, like if you watch Batman and Arkham Knight, his voice and his body movements seem to match because they're doing a full motion capture. So, particularly for the AAA games, it happens a lot.
Sure.
And it becomes, a lot more than just sitting on a chair for 4 hours doing voices and sounds.
Right. I want to ask you about a practice that has kind of been going around in the movie voiceover industry. I was at a talk featuring John St. John, and this was right around the time that Wreck-It Ralph was out in theaters, and he had told a story about he went in to track a role. And what they ended up doing was they basically used his take as I think he called it a scratch track for a bigger Hollywood name to come in. You know, he got paid a flat rate for his session, but then that Hollywood actor got cut in on some of the residuals of the film. And I'm kind of curious. Right. I'm kind of curious. You know, with your own experience with the latest Metal Gear, do you think that that's something that's a practice that's going to start working its way into the video game industry? Because when I heard that story, it kind of sent up red flags to me, you know, specifically around Metal Gear, because it was like the replacement didn't make a whole lot of sense. And I mean, I'm kind of curious what your opinion on that is.
Well, I think that's a pretty scummy way to do business. And, you know, it's like you hire an actor to come in and design a performance for you, and then you pay a Hollywood actor much more to come in, and they get the credit for your performance and they get the residuals for your performance. So it's kind of similar to, you know, during the financial crash in 2008, you know, the big studios were running out of money, and what I found they were doing was they'd want to hear a pitch on a big movie. So they'd bring me in to pitch it, and then they'd say, well, we want to hear more, and I'd design the whole movie, and then they'd hire some writer who cost a quarter of what I cost to write my movie that I came up.
God,
with.
That's got to be really personally frustrating.
Well, it's infuriating because I get nothing for putting all this work into designing their movie, and they get to save a bunch of money. So that's.
I'm assuming they don't tell you ahead of time that they're going to be doing that.
Yeah, do they just close that up front?
Oh, no. It's the promises that you're going to be writing the movie, and we just need to, you know, clarify it so that my boss can sign off on hiring you, and then they just don't hire you, and they hire somebody else.
That's horrible.
To make the same thing. Yeah, it's scummy, and it's nigh on illegal. So, I mean, it's essentially creative theft, but there's not much you can do about it because they own the rights to the movie. So you can't say, well, it's my movie. Anyway, I haven't heard that applied to voice actors before, but I can see it. I can certainly see that happening, but that's just flat out wrong. I mean, if somebody's good enough to design your performance, they're good enough to be in the movie.
Absolutely, and I think that was John's point as well. Was, you know, I spent all of this time characterizing, you know, the character and you know, figuring out that inflection, and then you just take my recording and for, you know, a big name Hollywood actor and just say, parrot this, you know, like that.
Right.
That's disappointing. That's not just disappointing from like someone who's, you know, into voice acting like me, but it's also disappointing for, like, I think if anyone knew that who watched the movie would just be disappointed to know that wasn't the person's genuine performance.
Yep, this guy right here, that was not something I was aware of, and that's actually one of my favorite movies, and now it's kind of like, wow, really?
Yeah, well, and that's why, you know, when people say, oh, well, you know, why put up a fuss? You've got a great job. Well, sure, that's true. But when people take advantage of you to that level and, you know, and are making a huge amount of money off your back, it doesn't feel right. And
absolutely.
That's the purpose of unions. That's the purpose of being able to collectively say, we want to be treated better, and we want to be appreciated for what we do. Because,
absolutely.
You know, I mean, I just crossed 100,000 Twitter followers who are primarily there because they love Snake. And so, you know, but this is the fight that they went through on TV, and this is the fight that they went through on movies and home video. And, you know, it's just, it's the continuing struggle. And now the voice actors have gotten to a point where they feel they've got enough clout that they can actually stand up to themselves. Well, which they didn't before.
Well, and I think you guys do. I absolutely think you guys do have the clout to stand up and say, hey, look, you know, we've helped brand your products. You know,
totally.
And that's a really important aspect. I mean, you know, people become attached to the characters that they play, that they watch vicariously, and you know, and you can't just change a characterization. It's like changing an actor and putting him in the same role and saying, "Oh yeah, that's just the same guy." Like, really? I'm supposed to buy that? Like, that's not supposed to take me out of the experience as a game player? And so, that kind of brings me, to my next question. What do you think of the coverage of this issue by either the games media or the media overall? It seems to not and I'm just talking as a casual observer who pays attention to the gaming media. It doesn't seem like as many people are talking about it that should. It seems like this is a really alarming issue that more people would care about if they knew about it, and it's not really getting the deep coverage. I see articles on on Variety, and I see articles on Kotaku, but then they seem copy and pasted among each other, and it's just like, who really cares about this?
Well, I think that's the nature of internal entertainment negotiations. I mean, I went through it when we had the screenwriter strike in 2008, and and everybody it doesn't affect people until their favorite TV shows go off the air.
That's true.
And then they're like, oh, well, why is that? And it's like, oh, well, the writers are complaining they're not getting paid enough. And then some people say, oh, well, to hell with them. And some people go, oh, okay, well, I hope they get paid more. I don't think, and you have to bear in mind that just because 96% of the electorate at SAG voted for strike authorization, that doesn't mean we're going to strike.
Right.
That means we have the leverage to say, look, we're going to shut down your productions if you don't at least come to the table reasonably. But I don't, that's the nature of entertainment. It's not really going to mobilize gamers in a huge.
Although I do think you have
actors playing Nathan Drake,
Right. Although I do think you do have the opportunity with social media to mobilize far more people than you did 10 years ago.
No doubt. I tweeted about it, and I got 5,000 retweets, and I mean, you have the ability, and people love their favorite voice actors. So you have so much more reach, and you have so much more impact, and I've gotten a huge amount of support, and I know the other actors have as well, and so that's gratifying. But I don't think anybody ever expects internal, entertainment negotiations to light the world on fire. It's just not the nature of the beast.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I think that if fans of these franchises and fans of these series knew that that the potential end product was in jeopardy, I think that would at least mobilize them to be a bit more vocal and maybe make Activision or EA, who want to hand out $4 million bonuses to their CEOs, or 1.5 or whatever it was to their CEOs. Maybe it would make them take the situation a little bit more seriously if they knew that their customer base was not exactly happy with their business decisions. So
no doubt, and they're anxious for that not to become a huge public issue, because it does, it's like if you change the voice and you lose 1% of your typical income on a game, well, that's way more than you would have had to pay in any residual situation or any bonus situation. That's the numbers are much larger than anything you would have to pay out to the actors. So yeah, they try to keep it under wraps, and and we try to save any direct threats to a company's business until the very last extreme, until you really have to go there.
Right.
Because in the end, we all have to go back to work with each other, and that's the tightrope you have to walk when you're negotiating with people.
Right. That's it's definitely an important issue, and I think the more people that are vocal about it, the more pressure that ends up putting on on these American game developers, that will hopefully you guys absolutely deserve to be cut in on these games that sell 2, 4, 6, 8 million units and make these gigantic profits.
Okay, well, no.
And let me make it clear that what the actors are asking for is, because the companies argue, well, a lot of games don't make money. well, that's fine. We don't expect to be paid then. But if your game sells more than 2 million units, will you pay us our scale rate again?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not a huge amount of money. It's not like they're paying out residuals for years and years and years. It's a very simple minor payout, and they won't even make that nod. So it's not like the voice actors are being greedy by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
All right. Now, see, I feel like kind of like video games and movies are a little bit different, because with movies, actors are like 80 to 90% of like the movie, but with video games, there's a lot of other people that go into making a video game.
What do you say to the critics that are like, what about the coders and the programmers and
graphic designers and the writers?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, first of all, I would take exception to the illusion is that actors are 80% of a movie. The reality is that people like, screenwriters, directors, producers are on movies for a decade before the actors ever get there. They come in for, a few weeks and get a huge amount of credit, as they should, because actors are great, and we watch them because they're great. Mm-hmm. But they're not 80% of a movie's construction or final outcome. As far as so people say, well, what about coders, developers, artists, sound mixers? Well, my feeling, like, again, none of these are my primary job, but I feel like they, deserve to be paid as well as anybody, and that they have not only the right, but the desert to receive, better pay and union enhancement as anybody. So,
sure.
For example, if you are an electrician and you work in the movies and you work regularly on big movies, well, you make one hell of a lot more than your average electrician. You have union protections and per diems,
right,
and certain things that have been built into your contract, which allow you to make $250,000 to $500,000 a year. So essentially, movies are recognized as a hugely profitable enterprise, and everybody who works on them regularly in an A-list fashion does very, very well, and they deserve to. So, but then you get great big games that say, okay, we're going to go non-union across the board. They're paying their coders nothing. They're paying their mixers nothing, and that's not right either. So I have sympathy. Great sympathy for anybody who is attempting to make their living in this industry, and I feel like if your project is profitable, you should be able to make money. You should be able to pay for your car, have a place to live.
Absolutely. So it seems insane with the amount of money that the video games industry is able to generate with a successful product. I mean, I know that there's a lot of budget and there's a lot of overhead that goes into making like a AAA game, but you get a successful game and there's so much profit. There's so much so much of a profit margin that it seems almost just flat out greedy to not cut your production staff in on some of that. And like I said, I think that there's a lot of people who would be surprised to learn that voice actors are only paid for their session. And that's it. That they're not cut in on the residuals.
I'm not sure that I even realized that until this whole thing went down.
Yeah. Same thing for me, Nico. When this was first brought up, and Nate mentioned that they don't really get paid residuals, it was kind of like, wait, really? They don't?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, to play devil's advocate and to speak on behalf of the studios and the producers for a second, games are not like movies. They come out and they do have a huge profit margin, but they come out essentially once. And that's it. So, a full-on ongoing residual situation probably doesn't make as much sense for them as movies, which you watch again and again and again over the course of 40 years or your lifetime or whatever.
That's a good point. I guess I never really considered that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is part of their argument. They're like, look, there's really only one window. However, then I do 9 games with Metal Gear, and then they come out with high-def versions, or they come out with the Xbox version, or they come out with this or that. And suddenly they reap a huge amount of fresh profits off of the work we've done, and nobody's cut in for that. So, so that has been part of my discussions with Konami over the years. I'm like, look, if you're going to re-release a game with my voice in it, pay me for the work.
Yeah.
Because because that deserves to be supported. So it's a little different, it's a little different financial model for movies or television, but they still need to, there still needs to be some perspective when you look at how those profits are dispersed.
And it seems like you guys take so many concessions to do this job that you guys just love. You guys just we can tell as gamers, we can tell playing through these how much when a performance is really good and when it like just totally makes a character, it totally drives the product home. And there are, I can cite 10 examples of terribly voice acted games that took me completely out of the experience. So when you guys say with the hashtag performance matters, it really does matter.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that the more cinematic and the more immersive a world feels, the better the game will sell.
Absolutely.
And like your friend said, actors are 80% of a movie. Well, they're not, but that's the level of impact you have.
Right. And, that's the perception.
Your character's best perception, and that's similar to the impact that a great video game character or a great video game performance can have. You listen to Nolan North do anything.
Yeah.
And you know that he is knocking himself out every time to make something great because he's a pro. He's one of the best.
When we first started looking into this topic too, when Nate brought it up to us, and a lot of the coverage seemed to just be focusing on the fact that you guys wanted more money, and it was actually an article by Will Wheaton that he put out saying that that's a part of it, but obviously it's all about safety too. You talked about safety when it comes to motion capture stuff and safety when it comes to stressful voice situations. But when I first started, I'm thinking to myself, well, if it's also about all this safety stuff too, why is it all hashtag behind performance matters? I've never played a game. Obviously, there's been games where voice actors absolutely have a huge impact on me. I am 100% in love with Jennifer Hale's Commander Shepard. And
yeah, sure.
But that game was still an awesome game, and I still would have played the hell out of it, even if the voice actor, wasn't great. And then, I think the very next day, the trailer for Halo 5 came out, which I've always hated the Halo games, just could not get into them. And then here you have Jennifer Hale and Nathan Fillion. I'm like, all right, Microsoft, you got me again. So I'm like, you're right. Performance does matter.
Right, yeah. No doubt. Because, because she's amazing. Nathan, those are both old friends of mine, and if Nathan Fillion's doing something, he's knocking himself out to do it and to do it great and to really deliver something that is going to make you love Halo more than you did in its previous iteration. So, and Will Wheaton's article was amazing. Like, part of what I loved about it was him saying, "Okay, look, is our job great? Is it fun? Absolutely, but." Take a great novel and read it out loud with all the emotion and energy and texture you can put into it for 4 hours. For 3 hours. Now do an hour of action sounds and see where you're at, man.
It's not easy.
It's exhausting, and it can kill your voice. So
we've had episodes of our podcast where we only go for 2-3 hours, and by the end of it, our voices are half gone, and we don't even do it professionally. I couldn't imagine doing it, sun up till sundown for days on end.
Yeah, and the difference between the podcast and the game is you're not being chased by enormous walking battle tanks all the time. Screaming or running or going over, shooting at people or whatever, and the level of intensity is extreme. So it's always funny because if I do 4 hours of voicing, I come home and I am wiped out.
Yep.
It's really taxing. Not that anybody should feel badly for me, but I kind of feel like I've helped generate. I've played my small part in helping to generate billions of dollars in profits for people. You can throw me a bone here and there.
Yeah, and that's totally reasonable. Absolutely. David Hayter, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and expertise on the subject. Again, not just being one of the most well-known voice actors in the video game industry, but also being involved with television and film as well, and writing. Just a really unique and important perspective on this whole SAG-AFTRA issue. I'm kind of curious. Did you ever see John DiMaggio's movie? I Know That Voice.
I did. I was so mad I wasn't in it.
I was mad that you weren't in it. I was waiting the entire time. I'm waiting for David Hayter, and
I know it's funny, because Jennifer was telling me as she was doing it, and some of my other friends were doing it. But but like I say, I'm an outlier. I'm well known in this industry, but I don't really. I've met John a few times, and I'm an enormous fan of, particularly of Bender. But he doesn't really know me, and so I think I get an undue amount of attention in the voice realm.
Well,
thanks to Snake.
I was just kind of curious if you had thought that his depiction of the industry was really fair, because as someone who's been a fan of voice acting and a fan of narration, and I come from the radio world, so people sitting in front of microphones, that's a huge attraction for me.
Right.
So I was just kind of curious. Did you feel like it taught a lot about the industry to me. So did you feel like it was a fair depiction of what it's really like being a voice actor?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you got a lot of great, honest stories out of these people, and one of the truly great things about voiceover is people are super nice, almost without exception. Like, it's not like on camera where you get a lot of egos and you get a lot of competition. Like, people are so supportive of each other. They're just awesome. A genuinely sweet group of people. Otherwise, they get kicked out of the inner circle. People are like, oh, that guy's a jerk, I'm not going to hire him.
Right.
And so I think it was a really nice window into not only these people that have a huge impact on your lives and you don't typically recognize it, but as to who they are and how they live. And if you look at most of their houses, it's like, they're living in a little bungalow, making your world a better place.
Absolutely, but it really.
I'm not. My house is spectacular, but listen, I'm in a very different position. So.
Right. Well, and that did, of course, translate to the movie very well. That it did feel much more like a look into a very close knit community of people who really genuinely respect each other on a professional level. That was one of the big things that big repeating theme in that movie was just like, everybody knows everybody, and you get jobs from knowing people. That's how it's done.
Totally.
And
people that want to break in, you got to get to know the people, and
exactly.
Slowly you work your way in, and it's a very tight knit circle of really, really amazing people and just true professionals. So I hope they don't have to strike, because that'll be pretty hard on everybody. But I hope they get what they want.
Yeah, definitely. And there you go, all of you con goers. I just answered the very first question of every Q&A segment of every voice acting panel I've ever sat through. How do I break into the industry? So there you go.
Yeah,
there you go.
Exactly. Well, what you do, essentially, what I always tell people is find a voice class in your town that is run by a casting director, and which ends with you getting a voice tape of a voice reel put together at the end, and that allows you to meet a casting director, meet some fellow actors, get a voice demo, and then you just start auditioning and hack away until
get in front of people. Yeah,
and don't be a jerk.
Yeah. Reputation is everything in this industry, that's for sure.
Oh, totally. Well, guys, thank you, and thank you so much for dedicating so much time to this. It's something I feel is important, and I really appreciate you.
No, thank you.
The platform to talk about it.
Thank you for giving us so much time. I mean, you're a busy guy, and to sit down and give us so much time like this is really generous of you. So thank you so much, man.
I don't know.